Tulshi Sen is our guest today, an amazing author, international lecturer, and business and leadership consultant. We're very happy to have you in the studios today. We were talking about thought patterns.
Yes.
And we talked about good thoughts, and we talked about negative thoughts as well.
Yes.
Which are necessarily not very bad thoughts, but are not very positive thoughts.
Yeah.
So positive thinking is very difficult to do.
Yes.
But positive thinking is the essence of everything, isn't it?
Yes. Let me explain
Yes.
my feelings about the difference between positive thinking and negative thinking.
Okay.
In the ancient systems, we were taught that anything you think, even today,
Right.
that it'll manifest.
Yes.
And positive thinking is actually thinking in the absolute, not depending on any conditions around you.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
Negative thinking is when you don't rely on yourself, when you rely on your conditions around you, dependency on the outside. You and I have one thing in common. We have consciousness. Everything is consciousness. Consciousness creates. The mind actually is the processor,
Okay.
like the processor, like a computer.
That's right. Yes.
Your consciousness is then planted into the processor. The mind is supposed to attract everything and bring it to you.
Right.
Now what happens in the normal course of our actions from childhood, we've been taught to depend on conditions. Fear was taught when you were a child.
That's right.
When you say, eat this food, otherwise the boogeyman will come and eat you up.
Right.
So fear was planted to you right away.
Right. Right.
And then the blame.
Right.
You fell on the ground and somebody beat up the floor.
Right.
So now you know you didn't fall because you couldn't walk properly,
Right.
but because it was the fault of the floor.
The floor was up and down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So negative thoughts comes out of dependency on the external, on anything else but yourself. When you can think,
Oh, okay.
say, I want to be a millionaire.
Right.
Now, if you say, I want to be a millionaire, right away your mind comes up, you have the vengeance and says, you are in debt. How can you think of $1 million? First pay off the debt. And that is the complete death of that thought. That is the negative thought. But the 4 proclamations, the 4 eternal principles, the 4 secrets, when practiced, meditated, believing, recognizing, believing, taking ownership and becoming, that will not happen. Then every thought
Yeah.
that you want to entertain from the absolute, that means unconditionally, means if you want to think you want to be a millionaire, your mind will say, okay, I'll get to work. Silence is power.
How do you do that?
Masters is to say, keep silent. Silence is power. And don't talk about your aspirations to anybody unless they're very close and they're in the same wavelength as you are.
Otherwise,
Keep silence.
but if you talk about, that makes so much sense. If you talk about a project, and you tell your best friend about it, somehow it sort of fizzles out.
Yes, as a matter of fact, silence, like when you plant a seed, you plant it underground in the dark. And you water it with quiet contemplation. Your first seed, the first thought is the seed. And then a little sprout will come out. It won't look like that apple tree. Then most people will say, hey, let's stamp it out. It's not an apple tree. But you know the seed. And you know your thought will manifest because you have understood the 4 eternal principles, the 4 proclamations. And then you don't tell anybody. See, those people
So do you have to be secretive in life?
No, not at all, but secretive about your desires.
Okay. We've got another caller on the line. Line 1, go ahead.
Hi, my mom and probably most of the Indian women in my life, they sort of base a lot of their teachings or something on fear. And, everything's based on fear from, come inside, lock the door, and just always be safe when you're outside. Like, how does that sort of weigh on their mind?
I'll tell you what, it's a very good question, excellent question. Fear has both a negative and a positive connotation. If you lose fear totally and you stand in front of a car just driving at 100 miles an hour, that's you're called mad. So you'll be locked up. At the same time, when you're afraid of your own shadow, then you are fearful. Fear was taught to us. We came out in this universe from our mother's womb, fearless. And when we landed here, from being a water creature to a land creature, we realized that we have no fear. Then we were told, even if we didn't eat food, that the boogeyman is going to come and bite you or destroy you, or the billi aa jayega. No, the whole idea is what we need to know. The fear is a thought. So when you mention that people come in and they guide their life around fear, unless we had the fear of being poor, we would not go and read the book, Ancient Secrets of Success, and become successful. Unless we had the fear of pain.
So fear has its own place.
Oh yes, fear is necessary, because unless you don't have the fear. But then when you live only in fear and don't see a way out, then that is maddening. That is absolutely constricting, and that paralyzes us.
So then how do you realize? I mean, the caller has a very good question. All the people, majority of the parents do that. I mean,
Oh yes. Believe me, I'm an Indian. I've grown up, as he's saying, that way. So the question is, it is true that the fear, save thing for a rainy day.
Yes.
Say, don't waste your money. If you're given $10 by your rupees from your grandfather in those days, save 5 for later.
Right.
So
what does that mean? Later you're going to be poor?
Yes, exactly.
Which is not good.
Absolutely. You have to learn to live with abandon. Because you have the thought. You have the thought power to create anything you want to create.
So when you're thinking there's going to be a rainy day, so rainy day will happen.
You'll have a rainy day. I bet you'll have a rainy day.
Caller, does that answer your question?
It does. I just had a follow-up.
Okay.
So when people always talk about fear and they don't want to take chances and they don't take any sort of risks, doesn't that sort of, constrict their life?
Yes, absolutely. I'll give you a little story. When Cortez went to Gulf of Mexico, they speak Spanish there. He realized he was outnumbered, at least 10 to 100. He had the most beautiful Spanish armada, and they were made of wood. He actually, in the middle of the night, told all his men to get out of the boats. They get on the beach and sent a few people while they were sleeping to burn the ships. And when the ships were ablaze, he stood against the burning ships and told his men, only way back home to Spain is by winning. And he used fear to get victory. And today they speak Spanish. Consciousness creates reality. Consciousness creates my reality. Pragyanam Brahma. Consciousness is the creator. Consciousness creates reality.